Oh, good morning, everybody. Today, I had an exciting weekend. So I woke up Saturday morning and I actually had a sale. I was very excited. Um, the sale was for one of my granny square bags that were made with skulls. And when I pulled it out and looked at it, I thought, boy, I really do like this. This is one of my favorite pieces that I've made. And so I decided that I would come and I would show you how I make my motifs pop on those granny squares so that they don't look all jagged around the edges. Give me 1 second, let me turn on my microphone here. Okay, you can probably hear me a lot better now. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm going to do today. So I have some pictures of just basic granny square motifs, and then I'm going to show you mine. So this is one of them. There's like big gaps, which, I mean, okay, depending on what the aesthetic is that you want for your piece, great. Um, and I mean that sincerely. I mean that sincerely, because sometimes I want things to look funky, and sometimes I want them to be nice and neat and pretty, and nice and neat and pretty, and I want them to pop so that from far away you can see them. This is another picture that I found of different granny square motifs with skulls on them. This is another one. I'm going to show you how you can make this granny square without like the jagged edges around the edge. These are just things that I've learned. These are just things that I've learned over the years. I've been doing it a long time. I'm an old lady. So yeah, so in the past, let me just go over a couple of things. Some of my past videos have been working on amigurumi and puppets. And I just want to let everybody know that this is my basic amigurumi doll. The pattern is free on my website. If you go to niftyknots.com, you can find it in the patterns. Out of that basic doll, we have made over the past couple of videos the giraffe, the cow, and the bunny. Again, this is just a recap. We're going to be working on granny square motifs today and making your motifs pop. But I just want to let you know that the pattern for this basic doll and the pattern for the accessory pieces for all three of these are on my website, and it is free. It's just niftyknots.com. You can go to patterns and you can find the basic doll pattern, and you can find all the accessory pieces for the three different animals. I also managed to, this weekend, get up. We had worked on shark puppets, and I was describing how the shark puppets and the other puppets that I make, I have a unicorn in here somewhere that started, if I can find it, I'll pull it out for you. I thought it was right here, but I guess it's not. But the puppets are the same way. It's one just basic sock puppet, and depending on what the accessories are that you put on it, makes it into a different puppet. I did manage to get the basic puppet. So the basic puppet is just this. This is the basic pointed nose puppet. I do have peacoats on the end of it. So, I mean, whatever you want to put on it. I've actually made them with variegated yarn and just put little horns on them like aliens or monsters and big googly eyes, and people have bought them. I am working on getting my round nose puppet up there, but so far I have the basic doll, the pieces for the amigurumi, and this basic sock puppet with the pointed nose. So if you want to make the shark, if you want to make a fox, you know, if you just wanted to play around and just practice. This particular one that we made that prompted me to put the pattern up there, it is also free on my website. It was the shark. And if you go back through some of my other videos, which you can because I have been uploading all these lives to YouTube, so that you can go back and watch whatever you wanted. And in the shark ones, we go over how I did the three-dimensional teeth and how I do short rows for shaping and amigurumi. But again, today we are going to work on some of those granny squares. So the granny square bag that I made, because I know most of the granny squares that you look for with skulls are vertical. Excuse me, they are not tilted, they are just square. So it's kind of hard to put together one of those great big tote bags when you need them to be triangular. That's kind of an easy fix. I'll show you how I do that as well. But I'm going to today show you how to make your granny squares go from this to this. And that is without, can't really see the white, there you go. That is without, as you can see, I did not sew that motif on top of my granny square. I actually did my granny square around that motif. So today I'm going to sit and I'm going to crochet, and I'm going to show you how I did that to make those pop. And I will also show you how I just kind of calculated how to make it into a tilted granny square instead of a square granny square, so that I could make the tote bag. The other one that I was going to work on this week this was just kind of trial and error, but I kind of really liked it, so I'll probably do a bag from this one too, because I really do like my tote bags. If I have to brag a little bit there, they are really nicely lined. They have a big zipper pocket in them. They have two big cell phone pockets in them. They have a little ring for a key clasp in them, magnetic closure, and they are like beach bag size. And there are, not only do I fully line them, but I line them up around the handles too, so that not even the handles stretch out. They're lined with denim. They're made with acrylic. You can throw them in the washer. I really do like my granny bags, but that's just me. Thank you for all the follows. Thanks for everybody that's joining. We are working on granny squares and how to make the motifs pop. So I just sold a granny bag with skulls on this weekend, and this is what your typical skull granny square would look like. And I'm going to show you today how I take my granny squares and make the motifs pop. So instead of getting the jagged edges, you actually make that pop on top of your granny square. And it's not an applique that's stitched on. It's actually, thank you very much, it's actually crocheted into the granny square. And instead of making a square, I tilted it, and I'll also kind of give you the formula for that and tell you how I tilted that as well. And it's not just the skulls that you can use these techniques with. It's this was the other one that I was going to show you. I don't have it blocked yet, but the other one was, I saw this little bunny, and the little bunny was a free pattern that I can't remember if I saw it on TikTok or Instagram, but it was a free pattern that I'd found. It was just, if you search on Google or Pinterest for crocheted bunny appliques, this does come up, and it's simple. You can see it's 2 rounds, and then it makes the head. Everything's made in one piece, so that it's just one piece. But I'm going to show you how I took this motif and turned that motif again to the bunny's beautiful. Thank you very much. I cannot take credit for it. I did find it as a free pattern. Like I said, I don't remember if it was on Instagram or Pinterest, but if you do Google crocheted bunny appliques, you should be able to find that little pattern that came up, because that's how I found it. And it was a free pattern. But this is what I did with the bunny applique. And again, it is not an applique that's stitched on. It's an applique that's crocheted, the granny squares crocheted right around it, but I'm going to show you how to make it pop so that your stitches aren't, so that you get that crisp edge around there. Thank you. I know, I was like proud of myself. I'm like, oh, well, let's try this. Wow, I really like that. So I sat and I made the rest of my bunnies so I can make the rest of my squares today. I did use a little safety eye there, and I put on them. But yeah, since I have the skulls, and I have my notes here for the skulls, let's get started. So this was the skull, and it's pretty much just 2 rounds as well. It was, I got the skull pattern off of Etsy, and I did purchase it, so I hate to just give you the pattern, but there are quite a few of them out there, and this is basically what you can find. The one that I liked was the one that starts with all the treble crochets across, and it's just made in two circles around. So if you can find that, and unfortunately I guess I wasn't that prepared today. I don't have the pattern for it. Well, I do have the pattern for it, but I don't have the lady who made the pattern, and I can't look that up because if I look it up, my live kind of pauses, and I don't want to do that right this second, but I will look it up and I'll see if I can find that and put that. If you go to my website, I have a page at the top, and what will I make with the bunny ones? I will make another granny square bag, great big tote bags. I have, this is, let me grab one, I'll show you if I can fit it in this. Hold on. So the granny square tote bags, and that's what I was excited about because I actually sold one this weekend. So I'll show you 2 of them. I'll show you the skull one because I had so this is the granny square tote bag that I made with the skulls, and that's what I'm going to make with the bunnies as well. And I line them all the way up through the handles with denim so that all the support is on your strapping. It's not on any of the crochet, so it doesn't stretch. They have magnetic closures. They have a big zipper pouch. You can see how big that zipper pouch is. They have a couple of large cell phone pockets on the other side. You can see my whole hand fits in there. I have a hook at the end for your keys. They don't get lost in the bottom. And I have a couple of them. I have a couple made with floral ones. I had a couple made with the skull ones. The skull one was the one that I sold this weekend. I was so excited. So that's what I'm going to do with the bunnies. I charge $135 for them, which I think is, I don't know, probably fair. My husband says I should charge more, but $135 I think is a fair price. Thank you. Again, on my website, I have a page and my website is not a blog site. It is just simply my website. It's like a gallery for or portfolio for people who want to see, like vendors. If they ask me the kind of things I do, I can direct them to that website and they can see those things. There's a little about me, and then I have a page that has the free patterns, and then I have my flappy dog, and then I have a shout outs page that I have links to patterns that I've purchased, so that I'm not actually like giving away the patterns, but I am at least giving you the link. So I will try to get the link to the skull. And again, the skull granny square, this was the skull that I used. This was the only part of the pattern that I used. The rest of the pattern was mine. But if you want to learn how to make this little skull, I think it was only like $2 for the pattern, but for $2 and I don't have to think. Sometimes that is well worth it to me because I don't mind doing all this creative stuff, but there are just some days and some things that I just don't want to take the time to sit and think about. So, let me throw this back in the bin since my huffy dog's walking around and I don't like him near my stuff. And I will come right back and I will show you how I do my granny squares so that the motifs will pop off of the page. And I've got Sir Charles here. I don't know if anybody of you guys have ever joined me before. This is my chocolate lab. That is Sir Charles in charge of the chocolate factory. And the one thing that I didn't do this morning was to get him his bone full of peanut butter so he leaves me alone. Pretty puppy. He needs some anti-anxiety meds, I think. Alright. If you guys could give me 2 seconds to quiet the dog will leave me alone. I can show you how to make the motif. Less than 30 seconds. In the meantime, if you're really interested in looking, these can keep you company. I can still chatter away. That is my shirt puppet. But as soon as I rid myself of the flappy dog, I can show you exactly how I do that one. And again, if you want the pattern for the actual skull itself, I really can't give it to you because it's a paid pattern, and I do sell some of my patterns, so I hate to give away patterns that I've already purchased because I don't think that's fair to the creator. So I do, on my website, niftyknots.com, there is a link at the top that says shoutouts, and that page has shoutouts to the different patterns that I have purchased from the different designers that I like. And I will try to, when I'm done and I upload this video to YouTube, I will, oh, thank you. I will also put the link to that granny square pattern that I used. The giraffe was, if you joined me a little bit late, this is a basic amigurumi body. If you go to YouTube, you can find all my previous lives, and we did basic amigurumi for about 2 weeks. This is the basic doll. The pattern's free on my website, and from that basic doll, we made the bunny, the cow, and the giraffe. And I also have the patterns for the accessory pieces like the ears, the horns, and things like that. They are also free on my website. If you're looking for tutorials, you can flip through my YouTube channel. I would be very grateful. But for now, I'm going to take my skull and I'm going to show you how I make him into a pretty motif that pops instead of a motif with like all the jagged edges around it. So, get my notes because even though I make the stuff like it's snowmen and bunnies, I mean, you could still make the same things. It's just a matter of like different color ears and things. If you can make blanket snowmen and bunnies, you can, I'm sure, make giraffes and all those other things. I knit too sometimes. Thank you. I knit too sometimes. I tat sometimes. I weave sometimes. If it has to do with string, I'm pretty much going to do it. But, okay. So, now we're going to take this skull that I showed you. Now, one of the first things you have to do, I'm not sure how the lighting is here so you can see the stitching, but one of the things that you want to do to make the motifs pop is you want to work, you see your your front loops and your back loops of your stitches. Now when I make one of those bags, it doesn't really matter if I'm looking at the front of the crochet or the back of the crochet, because the motif pops and it looks good. So what I'm going to do to make this motif pop is so super simple. I am going to flip it over and I am going to work so that the back side of my piece is actually the right side of my bag. So that is actually the back side of the skull, not the front side of the skull. There you go. So that's actually the back side of the skull, not the front side of the skull. And that's one of the ways that I get this motif to pop off the page or off the granny square. The first thing I'm going to do with it is, because I'm going to start around my granny square, because I'm going to start around my granny square with black around my motif, I'm going to take my black yarn, whichever hook you use. I mean, like I said, I like to use the worst weight in the acrylic, and I line them with denim, because that way they can just be washed and dried. I pre-wash my denim, I pre-wash my cottons that I use for my pockets. That way, if you took it and you just threw it in the washer and the dryer, it would still be... Oh, thank you. Come find me over on YouTube, or I'll be here tomorrow. I usually come on around 9:45 weekdays. So I'm going to take this, and since I want my motif to pop, like I said, I'm going to work so that the wrong side of my work is actually going to become the right side of my work. So when I turn it and I start to work, I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to look at the wrong side. I don't know how to make that light any better with the white, unless I get it super close. So I'm going to take it, and that's going to be the wrong side of my work is actually going to become the right side of my work. And I'm going to take it and I'm just going to join my yarn, and I know I joined my yarn here with a slip stitch. So it's in what would be, if I'm looking at it this way and you're crocheting this way, it would be in what would be the back loop. So I'm going to join it with a single crochet. And when you're working in the back loops like that, it doesn't really add a lot of depth to your piece. Whereas when you're working around a, thank you, when you're working around a circle, you have to increase to make your circle circular. But when you're working in your back loops like this way, it doesn't add the depth that's going to really distort the circle. So I'm just going to take this motif and I'm going to do one single crochet around it, the whole motif, with my black yarn, because I want my black to be my first round of granny stitches. And I know that when I go around this motif, and yeah, I do work over my tails for a while anyway, then it gets old. So I know my number of stitches. I know when I work around this skull, it's going to take 30 stitches. So again, I'm working with the wrong side of the motif as the right side, and I'm working through, when I'm looking at it from the wrong side, I'm working through, that is the wrong side of the motif, that is the right side of the motif. I'm using the wrong side as the right side, and I'm crocheting through this back loop back here, just doing single crochets all the way around. So when you work that first round in that first color. When you work that first round, just like around it in that first color, and you can see it really does not add much height, so you don't have to worry about increasing your stitches. And you work in those back loops like that, it makes that top loop pop out from the stitches, and you don't see where you've really attached the stitches because you're not pulling. Like for a corner, you're working 6 into one stitch, so you're not really pulling one of these loops from back there wide enough that you're going to see that you put a stitch in it. So by working your round of single crochets in it first, and again okay, so at the side of my cheek and my mouth I chained 1, and then I chained here in the jaws, in the corner of the jaw, and I know you're looking at it backwards, so you're looking at the back of the work. So I'm crocheting it this way, which is the wrong side that I'm going to use as the right side, and I'm crocheting through the back loops of the other one. So then when I get to this point, I'm actually going to crochet through my teeth, because I do want my teeth to look a little jagged. So I'll show you that in a second. So I crocheted through the loops on the teeth because the teeth were double crochet. So again, if you look at my motif that I have finished, that first round will separate those teeth. I know I probably should have worn a white shirt today, or a gray shirt or something. Separate those motifs. And then I'll do another one in the corner here. I will chain 1 for my corner stitches. I'm just going to make sure I have my stitch count here right. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 25, 26. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. I'll keep this easy. I'm going to make it 32 stitches. Okay, so I did 32 stitches around. Did I make that easy? I don't have my calculator with me. I don't know. Okay. And then I will join that round. I usually have, I guess I added a stitch somewhere that I didn't mean to, because for some reason I have 31 stitches and I want to have 30. So now that's the first round, and that first round that you make is actually what's going to make your motif. The next one I'll do is the bunny. That way it's a little bit easier. Is going to make your motif pop. Now, this motif has 30 stitches around. You have 4 corners. So what you need to do is you need to divide your stitches by 4 to know where you're going to put your corners. So like when I do the bunny next, I'm just going to do the first round of this to show you. When I do the bunny next, the bunny works out perfectly even. There's 24 stitches around. 6 stitches times 4 is 24. It's a perfect fit to make your angled. Yes, what I did was I took my motif, and this is the right side that you crocheted around. I took the motif, and instead of using this is the right side on my piece, on my finished piece, I flipped it over and I used the wrong side as the right side on my finished piece. And then, so I'm going to crochet this way. I'm going to use the wrong side to crochet around. And then the front loops are actually the top loops. The front loops are actually the top loops. And the back loops are actually the bottom loops when you flip it backwards like this. And you are going to then crochet into that back loop, which is the bottom loop. And this is now going to become your right side, and the right side is going to become the wrong side. Does that make sense? So when I crochet through those back loops only like that, it kind of hides the stitches. It kind of hides the stitches so that that top loop pops out on top of your motif. And that's how I did the bunnies as well. Now this one, because there's 30, I can't divide it in half. And I'll do the bunnies next. The bunnies are like perfectly even around. But I wanted to show you how I make the diagonal ones. So that would be the right side. And I have my whole first round, and you can see it doesn't really, if you look at it the way it's crocheted without me pulling it up, because the stitches will kind of bend. It doesn't really add any depth, so you don't really have, because you're working on the stitches that are a little bit underneath, so you don't have to worry about doing any increases, which is nice. So now for this pattern, I'm just going to start my granny my granny stitch. And I did my first loop around, or first row around in black, just because I was going to start my granny stitch in black. If you just simply started your granny stitch, it would pull that loop up from the stretching of the stitch when you're trying to put 2 or 3 stitches into one stitch, and you would still see like the loops or the jagged edges around it. Whereas if you just crochet that one little row of single crochet around like that, you get that pops out. So now I'm going to take it and I'm going to start my granny stitch. And I like to start my granny stitches in the corner. I know everybody's a little bit different. Some people start them on the side. I like to start mine with the second half of the first corner. So I'm going to do 2, 3, and if you look, that's going to be my corner. And I know that all my notes written down, took my husband's advice, I typed them all up in Google Docs so that I have my notes, since I can't find my notebook with my puppets in. I'm really kind of sad about that. Okay, so I'm going to skip a stitch. I'll hold it up and look. You are looking at it from the back. I'm going to skip a stitch. I'll show you the front in a minute. And then I'm going to work my 3 more double crochets in here for my granny stitch. And then I do believe I'm going to skip one more, and I'm going to do another round, and this works out perfectly for the 24. So if you have a motif that has 24 stitches, it works out perfectly. You don't have to worry about trying to. Now I'm going to skip 2 stitches. So this is the side I'm working on. There you go. So now I've got my first half of my corner. I have my 2 side stitches. Now I want my corner to be right on top of my head. So if you look, I kind of have to skip 2 stitches to get my corner right on the top of my head. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to skip those 2 stitches. And I'm going to do my 3 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet. Bunnies are next. Bunnies you'll be able to see a lot better. I don't know what I was thinking wearing this color today. So that then This is the first corner, the first half of the first corner. I have 2 granny stitches in there, and then this is the second corner. So now I'm going to do the same thing coming down here. On the other side, I'm going to skip 2 stitches, and I'm going to do my next cluster of 3. Because I skipped 2 stitches here, I'm going to skip 2 stitches there, so you can see where it's coming together as a granny. And then one more, so I'm going to skip 1 and put another granny cluster there. I'm not doing chains in between my clusters. I'm just doing 3 double crochets, move to the next stitch that I want, and 3 more double crochets. So again, you're looking at it from the back, and then this would be what it looks like from the front, and you can see that motif just pops right out of that granny square because you flipped it over and you did it from the wrong side in the back loops. So now I know that I want my next corner to be here, and for this next corner, and I only have to fudge the stitch count a little bit to get my corners, because I have like 30 stitches. If you have a number of stitches that are evenly divided by 4, it's a lot easier, and the bunny is divided by 4, so it's a lot easier. So for this corner, I actually worked the first half of the corner. I worked the first half of the corner in 1 stitch, and I worked the second half of the corner in a 2nd stitch. So I don't know how well you can see that. So I skipped 2 before my corner here. I worked my corner there over 2 stitches, and part of that's to try to get it as square as I possibly can, so that it does end up looking square. And this is not even a blocked piece. So then I'm going to take, and I'm working through, once I do that initial round of single crochet in the back loop, I lost it. Work through both loops. Sorry. You get to a certain point, and you get to a certain age where like things just go whoops, and they just fly out of your brain. Good morning, Janie. Okay, the bunnies will be a lot easier to see. So again, I'm going to skip a stitch, and I'm going to do my first cluster for this side. I'm going to skip a stitch, which actually puts me into the corner chain 1, which I am actually going to use that chain 1 there in the corner of the face as my second cluster for that side. And then I'm going to work another corner right at the very bottom center of my teeth. And again, I'm not working a chain 1 in between my granny clusters. I'm just working the 3 double crochet. I only work my chain 1 in the corner. And again, I know you're looking at this from the back side. I'll turn it around. I have to get it set up a little bit better. So now you can see I have the first corner, the second corner, or the first corner, the second corner, the third corner. I've put the 4th corner down at the bottom. I'm going to skip the next stitches since the first cluster on this side is in that corner chain stitch. I'm going to put the first cluster in this corner chain stitch. And I'm actually going to skip 1, and I'm going to do another cluster, That gives me my 2 clusters in between my corners. I'm going to skip one, and since on this side I did the first corner cluster in one stitch, the second corner cluster in the next stitch, and again you only kind of have to fudge those stitches and that stitch count with the first row if you don't have a number that's easily divisible by 4. And when I did the skulls, they're not. It comes out to be 30 stitches around. If you make it any bigger, it kind of doesn't. It makes the square itself a little bit wonky. So I'd much rather fudge the stitches on the first round than have my granny square look a little bit off. So this is the last cluster for my corner, and I'm actually going to fasten this off because after I did the black, the first round of black on that, I did gray. So I am just going to chain my 1 stitch for my corner, and those of you who know me, I like to knot off, and I will knot off these pieces. I will not only knot off, but I'll put some glue in them. When I pull the knot through, I'll put like just this tiny little dab of glue in there. But to knot off my pieces that are going to be hidden, I like to chain 2, snip my end, and if you pull your end through that chain 2 piece there, you can actually just take it and slide it down, and it forms the knot. So you don't really have to do any special knots, and at that point you can weave in. And because this is part of like the inside of a granny square, you're never going to see it. And you see, because we fudge those stitches kind of evenly, and then we have our motif that pops on our granny squares. So instead of our motif looking like, and I do believe this is the same pattern because when I count the stitches around it, it looks like the same skull. So instead of working the skull the way she works it on the pattern, just knowing those little techniques and those which you can do, those tricks and how you can manipulate your yarn and your work and utilize your front and back stitches instead of seeing all the jagged lines around the edge of the stitching. Here's another example. These are just ones that I pulled up. So instead of seeing all the jagged lines around your stitching, or instead of having like big gaps where you've chained so that you didn't have to do that, you now have a motif in a square shed. And like I said, I did not even block this square. So even though we fudged those couple of stitches around the ends to make sure we got our corners where we wanted our corners, this without blocking is pretty much perfectly square. And all I do is then stitch them together. So that was the skull. It was probably a mistake to do the skull first because we had to fudge some of the stitches. But I'm going to do the bunny next, which you should be able to see a lot better. And this is the bunny motif that I did. And again, if you go to my shout-outs page on my website, by this afternoon I should have, if I can find the link to this, I will put the link up to that on my shout-outs page. And the link to the original granny square pattern, because it's a purchase pattern that I bought, was actually looks like this, but the skull is the same. I just did those different tips and tricks to make the skull pop out of my granny square, so it looks, you look at it from far away, it really looks like a granny square, or it really looks like a skull. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the bunny and show you how the bunny is actually a little bit easier, because I'm going to work, again, this is the right side of my bunny. Get my yarn here that I used. This is the right side of my bunny. So to make this motif pop, you really, I mean, nobody's going to know this. Unless somebody that crochets like me or you looks at it really, really close, they are never going to realize that that's the back of that stitch, not the front of that stitch. Never realize it. So again, I'm going to take my yarn. I'll leave a little tail just in case I need to weave in ends. I'm going to take my yarn, and to make this bunny motif pop, the first thing I'm going to do is one round of the solid color that I'm going to use for the first granny square, or for the first set of granny stitches. So you can see here the first set of granny stitches that I'm going to do are white. So the first round I'm going to do to make this pop out and not get those stitch lines in there is I am going to do one round of single crochet. I am going to take my motif, I am going to flip it over, and I'm going to start at the tail because that's kind of where I wanted. The tail is kind of where I want the first point to be. So that's where, after my first round here, I want to be able to do my first set of granny stitches. So this would technically be the right side. You're going to make it the wrong side, and instead of crocheting through the top loops, you're going to then crochet through the back loop. So I'm going to make that the wrong side. Okay, so my wrong side is my right side. My right side is my wrong side. I am going to join my, wait till the camera focuses. I'm going to join my first single crochet in that back loop. Now that's the back loop to me because I'm looking at this side as my right side. And I know there are 24 stitches around this bunny, so I'm going to join it with a single crochet. And again, that's what's the right side that I'm looking at to crochet. So I'm going to then go into the next back loop and just work another crochet, another single crochet. I'm going to go into the next back loop and work another one, and I'm going to continue to do that all the way around. Now I know I have 24 stitches, and I know there's a head there, so I'm going to show you what we're going to do with our head. I don't know if any of you guys have ever made squares with Irish roses, where you kind of work behind things. That's what's going to happen here with this bunny. So I know I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to continue working 5, 6, and now this is going to be my front of when I'm done. I'm going to fold this forward, and I'm just going to continue working the loops on the back of the round. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not doing any increases. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So again, this is the front, going to be the front. This is the wrong side of the bunny, but it's going to be the front side of the bunny's motif. So I'm actually working the back loops with it turned backwards. So I've got, and I'm not doing any increases because you can see when you work that back loop, because it's kind of tucked down in there, you're not going to get really enough height you're not really going to get enough height. It almost looks like it's a slip stitch on top of it, but it's not. It's a single crochet in the back loop while you're looking at it from the wrong side. So if you look at it from the right side, that's you're crocheting. So if you look at it from the right side, you're crocheting in this bottom loop here. But this is going to end up being the right side of your motif. I'm hoping I'm explaining this right, or at least so that you can get it. So I'm going to finish going around this whole rabbit. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And I end up right back where I started. So what was the right side of our motif, you can see the stitches, what was the right side of our motif now becomes the wrong side of our motif. And that one single crochet round around it is what's going to make it pop without stretching the loops from that first round of granny squares or granny clusters. And we're just going to put like a little stitch as we go around the top. I think I pulled like a stitch from the back of the head when I got to this row, and then I just pulled one stitch through the ears. You can see where I attached the ears to the top to that row. I don't think I did not attach the nose anywhere. I figured I would just glue that down. I put my safety eye in there. So now once you have that first round of single crochet around there, which you can see, you can barely tell when you look at those granny clusters, that those granny clusters are actually attached to the piece. The motif is not stitched on. So that first round of single crochet around is really important so that you don't get those, if you're looking to make your piece actually pop off the granny square. So now that I did it, and I did that first round, I am going to, I wish you guys could shout at me when I'm off camera. That way I knew that you weren't seeing me. So I'm going to do my slip stitch. And like I said, I like to start my granny squares with the second half of the first corner. So I like to do 3. Everybody does them differently. So I like to do a chain 3, and that is the first half of my granny cluster. Since this is an even 24 stitches, 6 times 4 is 24, I know that I have 6 stitches to work with, so I know all I have to do is skip 1 stitch around the entire way, and I get my clusters that I want. So, and again, in that first single crochet round, that's the back, I'm going to skip the first stitch, and I'm going to go into the next stitch, and I'm going to go through both loops. So I'm going to skip the first stitch, and I'm going to go into the second stitch, and I'm going to go in through both loops. And I know with this amount of, with my 24 stitches, I'm going to have 2 clusters in between each corner. So that's 1 cluster. I'm going to skip another stitch. I'm going to work through both of those stitches and do another granny cluster. I don't know what they're technically called. So I have my corner, because again I'm going to make a granny bag out of this, so I want my corners to be offset. So my first corner is going to be in my tail, and then I'm going to skip one, just make sure. Yep, I just skipped one all around. So then I'm going to skip the next stitch, and since I have my 2 clusters in there, I'm going to work my corner. I do not use a chain 1 stitch between my clusters except for my corners. So 2, 3, and this is a corner, and you see how stretched out this stitch gets from having 6 stitches in it. It gets pretty stretched out. If you did not work that first round of single crochet, it would actually stretch the stitch from the motif. And when you looked at it from the right side, you would see where those stitches are stretched. But if you put that one round around it, if you flip this upside down and you work so that this is the wrong side, and you just stitch that one round of single crochet through those back loops, you really get your motif to pop. So you can see it just kind of pops right off there, but we've done nothing but continue around the round. So let me continue around this one. So I'm going to skip one and do my cluster. I'm going to skip another one and do my second cluster for the side. And then I'm going to skip one, and I'm going to do my next corner, which is going to be my 3, chain 1, and 3. Now, I'm not real worried about the head being floppy, because I am going to secure these ears up there with just a stitch. So when I go around at the very, very top, because that's kind of where my ears ended. So when I do my round of single crochets, I don't know if you can tell, I have actually picked up a loop from my ear to secure it to the top. And then when I put my safety eye on, I put my safety eye through the whole thing, because this is going to end up being a tote bag that's lined, so I'm not going to see this part of it. If you wanted to do that, you could just put the safety eye through just the fabric from the bunny, and then you wouldn't see it on the back, which is actually what I think I'm going to do with the rest of them, because the bunny's eye looks like it kind of disappears in there, and I don't know if I like that or not, so I'm going to have to try it both ways. But so don't worry about the head flopping around, it will get secured. So we did our third corner. We're going to skip one and do our next cluster, and again, I know because I have an even 24 stitches, 6 times 4 is 24, I can work 2 clusters, 2 granny clusters, which are just 3 double crochets in 1 stitch. You don't actually pull them together like a cluster. And then I'm going to skip one, and I'm going to do my next corner. I do chain 1 in my corners before I do my second set of 3 in that corner. So it's getting there. So I'm going to skip my one and do my 3 double crochets in that one. I know I can skip my one and do my 3 double crochets in that one. The beginning of the round is always funky because you have that extra like chain 1 in there, or you know where you. But I am going to skip that, and I'm going to go right into. I'm going to go right into the stitch where I started the first corner. or if you wanted to, because you don't want it to be that big of a gap, you can go into the beginning stitch or the beginning chain that's right beside it, but I'm just going to go into that one. 2, 3, and I think I did 2 rows. Okay, so I did 2 rows of the white. So you can see now we have a totally even square that we, instead of working on the right, with the right side of the motif being the right side of the motif, we worked with the wrong side of the motif being the right side, and then in those back loop stitches, and then the top loop pops out so that it pops off the granny square. And now that this is how I do my corners, since I like to do my corners where I do the first half of the corner and then I end with the second half of the corner, I, in my corners, will actually single crochet, chain 2, and that's my space in my corner, and then I do, once again, my first cluster to start the second round of granny square, or granny stitches around my bunny. And yes, you'll see how these all clusters all separate when I start doing the clusters in between them. I'll just do a few here to show you. But I have a book around here somewhere that has like all these circular animals that are then made into like hexagon blankets. And I thought, oh, I have to look for that book because it has all kinds of circle animals in. My sister-in-law made one with lions for my son. I made one, and you can see how you can tell the definition in the granny stitches and clusters once you start stitching into the cluster from below. Yes, it is acrylic yarn. I do use acrylic yarn for a specific reason. I use the acrylic yarn because I use these squares to make the granny square totes. You can see how that pops. That pops so nice on that black. It still pops nice. But to make the granny square totes, so I need them to be off-centered, or not off-center, but tilted. So instead of being like this, I need them to be like this to make the granny totes. And I use the acrylic yarn because acrylic yarn is extremely durable and washable. It will last forever. It can take pretty much anything without staining too much. And then I line the bags with denim. I'll grab another one. I'll grab it to show you again. And the reason why I don't use cotton is because that I found that no matter the quality of the cotton that I use, it tends to fade wash after wash. And when I make my tote bags, I want them to last. I want them to be able to carry a lot of stuff in them. I don't want them to stretch out. And I want them to last, including the outer piece of the shell, which is what, like I'll make this one, I have all my bunnies made. I just have to do my squares. And then I have all my skulls made. I just have to do the rest of my squares. But this is what I start out with. Let me just grab my tote bag here. I can show you. And you'll see what I mean. So, I know you've all seen these. For some reason, and I've been doing this since, should I say it, the 1970s. I have never seen granny squares so popular in my life until this year again. Ever. Like, I never did granny squares, and now everybody's wearing granny squares. Everybody wants granny squares. Thank you so much for all the likes. So this is the bag, and I don't know if you can, it's a pretty big bag, and you can see it's like probably almost like sweater size. It's a big tote bag, like a big beach bag would be. And then, so I want when people to look at this far away, I want them to see the skulls pop. I don't want the acrylic to hold a stain the way cotton holds a stain, because I want them to be used. They're all magnetic snaps, and I machine stitch. You can see some of my with even what you can see, you can't see. I use transparent thread, and I actually machine stitch the lining in. I start to talk too much, I start to cough. And you can see I have them lined all the way up through the handles of it. So that's one of the reasons why I use acrylic. I use acrylic because it's that much more durable, and I want this bag, when somebody buys it, to be durable. I want them to open this bag and see how gigantic it is. It's gigantic. And use it. I want them to be able to, like, I love the skulls. You know what? I like the skulls too, and skulls sell. Let me tell you, if any of you guys are on here, skulls sell. If I could sell nothing else at my booth, I know if I have something with skulls in my booth, it sells. It's amazing. So that's what started this whole, that I decided that this is what I would do today, because, thank you, Janie. I love the granny skull bags, but that's what started this, because I actually made a sale on Saturday. But you can see the pocket, the zipper pocket is, I can fit both of my hands in that zipper pocket. The zipper pocket is huge. The two pockets here, I'm trying to think of something that's big enough that I could put in it. Oh, here, my lint roller. I have a lint roller here. You see how big that pocket is. Both those pockets are the same size. I have a clip so that you don't lose your keys in the bottom. Like, I make my tote bags so that people are going to use them and they're not going to fall apart. They look aesthetic from the outside. They are, it's denim and it's pre-washed. And I do actually make the linings just a little bit bigger than my bags, just a tiny bit, because the acrylic yarn tends to soften as you use it and wash it, so it will grow, like, this might grow a quarter of an inch if that at most, but I do make my lining just that little bit bigger to compensate for that. Yeah, I want people to buy my bags too. How do I make the lining? It's denim, and I pre-wash it. So I cut my template. If you can see the bag. So I cut my template for the bag, right? And then I hem. This is folded down. This is folded down right here. So I hem the edge and top stitch like you would top stitch denim. And then after I've hemmed it down and I've top stitched it, I actually go through and you can see, I actually go through with polyester transparent thread, which is pretty high tolerant, heat resistant, and it's really strong. And I actually machine stitch this. And you really can't see from the outside that I machine stitched it, because it just kind of like disappears into the stitching. And I machine stitch it. And then I take another piece of my denim and I roll it like bias tape. And then I top stitch down either side. And after I've top stitched down either side, I then once again, so you can see my top stitching. And then I again, once really, really close. I don't know. Let me see if I can find a place where you can see a little bit. Here you can see a little bit better where it kind of bubbles up there. Once I've top stitched it, I take my polyester thread again and I actually machine stitch it. And again, you really can't, so, oh, polyfill everywhere from those animals, from the plushies. You can't see the top stitching that I use the acrylic thread with on the top part because it just kind of disappears into the crocheted stitching. It's the only thing bad about polyfill. It's all over everything. But and then I put my handles on first. I do my handles so that then when I do the corners of my bags, I just fold the corner underneath at the point, at the junction where the strap would meet the handle. And that is actually stitched and top stitched and stitched and top stitched as well. So this whole thing is trying to stop. It's pretty much just a denim tote bag with the outer lining. And I had a couple of them I made. They're on my shop site. One's blue and yellow with like floral granny squares. The floral granny squares are just kind of like floral granny squares. But, oh, you're welcome. You're very welcome. If any of you guys want to see any of this all over again or have any questions, when I'm done, I do upload these videos to YouTube, and you could find it under Nifty Knots as well. Yeah, you know what? They were fun. But that's how, but that's what I wanted to go over today. Because when you look at so many things, you know, everybody likes to try things, and they should, but it takes years to realize that, like, I can make my granny square look like this instead of this. And again, it's the same skull. That is exactly the same skull. This is a good example of using a chain 2 method instead of a magic loop. Because when you use a chain 2 method, you get that hole there, and that's why I say leave a long tail, because you can weave it around there and pull that hole closed. When I do my skulls, I actually do them in a round, and I start with a magic loop, not a chain 2. So this is where my magic loop begins, and then I do my entire first round, my double crochets, my chains. I do that entire first round in a magic loop, and then I just pull it tight and I secure it. When I do make the granny squares for the tote bags, I secure everything on the front. So you're kind of looking at the front where I have my knots tied and secured, because I'm going to flip that over like we've been discussing, and I'm going to use the back side of the stitching as the front side of the motif, so that I can use those stitches, so I can manipulate those stitches so that it pops off the granny square. And again, this is the example of the bunny. I have the bunny, so it just kind of pops off. But yeah, that's what I wanted to go over today. It's been a little bit over an hour. If anybody missed it, you should be able to find it on YouTube by this afternoon. I will also go to my website and put a shout outs link to the lady who does this granny square, so that you can find her pattern. I don't want to put the pattern just up there for just the skull, because I did pay for her pattern to get how she did her skull. I think it was like $2 or something like that. It wasn't that much, but I'll put a link up there to the skull. We went over how to divide your stitches, to tilt your granny square, how to work in the, how to flip your motif over so that this is actually the wrong side. So if you were making like a lion or something else, you would then, oh, thank you so much. You would then put all your details on the wrong side so that you could work your first round the way you did it there. But yeah, all that would be on YouTube later. This entire if you wanted to watch it and go back and pause and look at things. I hope I got things as close as I possibly can. Do I block the squares? I'm lazy. No. I practice my techniques. I know all kinds of tricks, but I hate having to block anything. Now, if I make like lacy shawls, like you'll see on some of my pieces, I have lacy shawls, but I try my darndest to, when I knit and crochet, to not have to block anything because I hate it. So no, these are not blocked. The lacy shawls that you might see on my website, they are blocked. But my granny squares, no. I do my best to do my counting, and these are not blocked. I made these both last night. I have done nothing but sit there and go like this and toss them into my bin, and then stitch them all together. None of the blocks on this, none of these are blocked. I just stitch them all together. I hate having to block. I don't like to block anything. Doilies, my mother loves doilies, so when I make her doilies, I block things. So, if you want to watch how we did that, you can go back and find it on YouTube on my YouTube channel. Again, I do have on my website the basic pointed nose sock puppet, which I then made a shark out of. One of the lives on the Nifty Knots playlist goes over the shark puppet and how I made it, and we did the short rows and the three-dimensional teeth. Also on my website, it's the pattern for the basic amigurumi doll, and the accessory pieces. This is the same basic doll. I'm showing you the back. Same basic doll. This is just blanket yarn. This is worsted weight yarn. This is also a free pattern on my website, and there are links to the accessory pieces like the bunny's ears, the cow's horns and ears and nose. Same with the this is the cow. This is the giraffe. I need to get myself together. I forgot my water, so I'm losing my voice. So if you want to look for those, they're on my website as well, and previous lives that I've done on TikTok are also uploaded to YouTube, and they are this and the shark puppet and things like that. I hope you'll join me there as well. I try to upload all of my shorts from here to there as well, just in case. And the lives, a couple people had asked me previously if I would post them to YouTube so that they could go back and watch them as tutorials. So I do. I do have all my lives from my TikToks posted as tutorials under the playlist Nifty Knots. Nifty Knots is also my channel. There are links in. I think I have a link to my YouTube in my link tree in my bio. But if not, if you just search Nifty Knots, one word with a Z, and NIFTYKNOTZ is one word. Oh, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Yeah, come back and join me. I should be back tomorrow, and maybe I'll get all my blocks done, and I can sit here and show you how I stuff. I'm hoarder stuff, but I'm a bag lady, so it's okay because I always have bags to put my stuff in. So maybe tomorrow I'll get all my squares. I'll have all my squares done, and I can show you how I stitch my squares together. And maybe that'll be tomorrow's live. But usually around 9:45 or so is when I jump on. Usually sometime shortly after 11 is when I try to jump off. I hope you like the content. I hope you learned something. Like I said, it's years worth. Now, I haven't done a granny square since the 1970s. I hate to say that because I know I'm dating myself, but I was like this big when I learned. So does it help? I was like this big when I learned. So I'm old, but not that old. But I will, hopefully you guys will all join me again tomorrow. we can stitch a bag together, work on the handles. I don't know if we'll get to the handles tomorrow because it takes me a good hour, sometimes 2 hours to stitch the bag together. But possibly the next day I'll do handles, and I'll show you how I do the rick-rack on the top of the handles so that I get that neat little design on the top of the handles too. So that'll be this week as well. So thank you for all the followers. Thank you for everybody that joined me, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.